Good evening and welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Dan Lazat. I'd like to start by acknowledging that Museum London sits at the forks of the Deshkan Zibi, or the Antler River, or much later, the Thames River, and is on the traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, Lenape, and Attawandaron peoples. And given that we are kicking off a discussion about research and researchers, I'm going to suggest that and welcome everybody to take a look at indigenous.uwo.ca to see the incredible breadth and strength of Indigenous researchers that we have at Western and all of the awesome work that they do and that connects to the public good. So I'd like to tell you a little bit about the Rotman Institute of Philosophy before we get started. So as I said, my name's Dan, I'm the director, and the Rotman Institute of Philosophy is an interdisciplinary institute that emphasizes philosophy in conversation with other disciplines. And that is really a core reason for why we hold this public lecture series and why that lecture series doesn't exclusively include people who might call themselves philosophers. Because instead of thinking about what we want to do as applied philosophy, like philosophy is something you could like apply, like paint, it's much more important to us to think about an ongoing learning and conversation with the disciplines and the people that we want to learn from as we try to ask and answer to the best of our abilities some of the most challenging questions that people run across. So I'm myself not a philosopher, but I have huge respect because the folks that I work with, when they ask questions like, how do we know what we know? Or what's real and what is not? Or what does it mean to live a good life? I think most of us would kind of think about it for a bit and be like, whew, that's hard, I'm gonna go do something else. But these folks have asked these questions for the past 4,000 years. So they are really dedicated to trying to understand the world around us. And I'm very, very grateful that we have a fantastic lineup of speakers that are going to help us understand the world around us and our place in it as researchers and as academics. And our first speaker is Dr. Brendon Samuels. He holds a PhD in biology and a Master of Neuroscience from Western and a Bachelor of Science in psychology from the University of Guelph, not too far. While studying at Western, Brendon served as the chair of the City of London's Environmental Stewardship and Action Community Advisory Committee, as the Society of Graduates Sustainability Coordinator, and as a member of Western's President's Advisory Committee on Environment and Sustainability. He founded and leads Bird Friendly London, a grassroots organization dedicated to protecting and celebrating birds in the city. He's currently the vice chair of the Old Northeast Neighbourhood Association and teaching a graduate course about sustainability topics at Western. He has received awards recognizing his research and service from Western University, Nature London, the London Environmental Network, Nature Canada, and the Urban League of London. He has also appeared on the podcast Ologies. I don't know if you guys have heard it. And I was like, he's a big deal. Can we get, if you haven't heard Ologies, like you need to listen to it. I think actually the spirit of Ologies is much like the spirit of Rotman, of, unbounded curiosity about the world around us and how people try to understand it. So I will get out of the way and let's please warmly welcome Brendon.
Confirming everybody can hear me okay? Awesome, thank you. It is a huge privilege to be standing here and giving the first lecture as part of this series this fall. I have to say, talking to philosophers makes me nervous because I am also not a philosopher. I would call myself philosophy curious, but I have a background in ecology, and so a lot of the work I'm going to be talking about today, I'd say comes from that place, but I like to think that it is informed by my philosophy. The title of my talk is Rooting Resilience, a call for academics to love where we live. And I hope today I can tell you the story of why I love where I live and how that has served me in the work I wanted to do, but also how I think I've managed to affect the public good in my community. And while I am at Toronto Metropolitan University, I want to clarify, I still live in London. I work from London. This is my home. This is a photo I took downriver from London on lands that are actually owned by Western University beside Chippewa of the Thames First Nation and Oneida Nation of the Thames. Before I begin, I want to acknowledge the land that we are on is associated with the treaty known as Treaty Number 6, or the London Township Treaty, which was signed in the year 1796 by a representative of the Crown, along with 10 chiefs, warriors, and people of the Chippewa Nation. And that means that this treaty is actually older than what we now call the province of Ontario. As of the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation last week, when many of us were wearing orange, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's 94 calls to action are still mostly unfulfilled, a decade after being issued. 42 calls remain in progress, 22 are stalled, 15 have not begun at all. Call number 43 urges federal, provincial, territorial, and municipal governments to fully adopt and implement the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples as the framework for reconciliation. The federal government legislated the declaration in 2021, and earlier this year, the City of London adopted its 2025 to 2035 Reconciliation Action Plan to implement the declaration in local policy. However, the Government of Ontario has rejected calls to adopt the declaration into provincial law, and many serious violations of First Nations treaty rights and sovereignty have been committed by our current government in Ontario, representing our interests, such as the recent passing of Bill 5. Specifically, under the declaration, Article 19 obligates state representatives to consult and cooperate in good faith with the Indigenous peoples concerned with their decisions through their own representative institutions in order to obtain their free, prior, and informed consent before adopting and implementing legislative or administrative measures that may affect them. I think about this a lot because, as I mentioned, decisions are being made in our name that are contravening the spirit of this treaty. I also want to begin my talk by acknowledging the loss that I imagine many others in this room are feeling. Dr. Jane Goodall was a personal hero of mine. She's provided so much wisdom in her life that will certainly outlast her time with us. But I wanted to start with this quote of hers because I think it resonates with my talk. Change happens by listening and then starting a dialogue with the people who are doing something you don't believe is right. So I was invited to speak on connecting research to the public good. And I looked at the description for this series and the sorts of questions that were laid out, and I thought, I'm going to be a good academic and try and speak to these in detail. I'll circle back to them in a moment, but this is the general structure that my talk today will follow. And it's strange to be up here because, to be honest, I consider myself to be a strange academic. Since I've been a graduate student, I've been rather noisy. I don't just stay at a desk or a lab bench, but I'm very interested in the applications of knowledge. And while I studied some wicked problems, I was interested in how we can solve those problems in society, including, as Jane Goodall referenced, standing up for when we think something is wrong. We need to reach out and speak to the people responsible. And so this is a photo taken on campus a couple years ago in response to new provincial legislation that many in our community were deeply concerned with. Before I begin, I'm also going to try and add some definitions here. And when I searched what is the public good online, you can imagine I came across a litany of different definitions and interpretations of that. In contemporary terms, sometimes we refer to the public good as referencing things that our governments deliver for us, such as public infrastructure, national defense, our public education and healthcare systems, security, emergency response, etc. And generally, these goods cater to the needs of communities, such as our local community here in London, Ontario. I would ask that maybe we consider the public good to be somewhat distinctive from the common good. And in terms of Western society that we live in, some of the earlier thinkers on this, like Plato and Aristotle, were thinking about this back in the year 300 to 400 BC. And contemporary scholars have offered different interpretations of what exactly they were saying back in the day. But generally, we can understand that a common good is shared and benefits all or most members of a community, or that the common good can be achieved by citizenship collectively, collective action, active participation in politics and public service. Important to note that there have been many other understandings of the public or the common good outside of the Western tradition. The Buddha achieved enlightenment prior to Aristotle thinking about these things, and there have been many other societies and cultures that have deliberated on what do we consider to be good. And of course, in contemporary terms, many philosophers, economists, political scientists have their own interpretations. I think important to note that tracing back to the origins of Western society, the community that shared in the public good was relatively small compared to our communities today. You could be sitting out on your porch in Athens and talking about philosophy until sunset. We are a little bigger now. And I think in considering our society being very global in nature, I ask, is humanity a community? When we talk about the public good or the common good, can we encompass all of the people that live on this little blue speck? And particularly as we now understand that our planet is in a dark place and that there are major things we have to come to terms with within our lifetimes if we want to continue to call this place home, this raises other questions along the lines of the public good. For example, who looks after the goods of non-human communities? Are these part of our public? Who is accountable for a public good that transcends any one nation, such as responsibility for global climate change or human rights violations? And what happens if there's a conflict between what we would consider to be the public good in the short term and in the long term? And so I think these questions underpin important global frameworks that various countries have adopted, such as the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. I imagine many of you in the Academy would be familiar with these. More recently, governments are advancing the Global Biodiversity Framework, which is newer, and I'm hoping to see more action on that front here at home in Canada. But speaking to the questions of what do we as academic researchers, teachers, students, leaders of research centers and institutes, and members of our communities and society, what role do we have to connect our work to the public good? I would answer that we are thinkers, we are leaders, and we are stewards, that we advance the public good based on evidence, logic, morality, and ethics, and that we affirm the sanctity of life and rights for all. To the question, how can we best attend to the needs and interests of communities and society? I would answer, we listen to society so that we can be present and responsive. We can focus as academics less on measuring our impact on our CV and perhaps more on living our impact within our surroundings. And finally, we can uphold society's values and standards, especially when other custodians of the public goods may falter. And how ought do we envision the public good and the role of higher education within it? Well, we can use our academic freedom to seek the truth, even when the truth is perhaps unpopular or inconvenient. We can critique institutions and their actions from a place of caring and for the sake of the public good. And we give our communities reasons to have hope, especially by showing up for them. I think also important is to ask the question, what does it mean to be an academic in the year 2025? Having just finished a PhD, I find myself thinking about this. In 2021, a report was published by an expert panel that was assembled by the Council of Canadian Academies. And essentially what they were interested in is what happens to PhDs after they graduate? It turns out that there are no jobs for PhDs, or the jobs are far and few in between. Both within the academy and also, the report notes, non-academic sectors have not recently adjusted their uptake of PhD graduates. This is while we are churning out more and more PhDs each year. That within the academic culture, sometimes we can promote the idea that careers other than tenure-track professorships might be considered a failure. That many PhD graduates feel they need to seek employment outside of Canada out of necessity, and that mobility is increasingly viewed as a requirement for having finished a PhD and now figuring out what to do with it. Interestingly, the report also observes that for many PhDs, it's not just about your economic aspirations. It's not just about getting a good paying job. People complete PhDs for a variety of reasons. And I think this is core to the theme of my talk today. If you are currently a grad student, I'm sorry. It's a hard time to be in grad school. This paper from Nature came to mind. They did a survey and found that Graduate students are very stressed, and a lot of the uncertainty surrounding their future prospects contributes to that. When they asked graduate students, why are you stressed? Their answers were along the lines of difficulty maintaining work-life balance, financial worries, uncertainty about future employment. You get the drift. And it's not just graduate students that are struggling. This is another report from 2018 that was looking at contract academic staff. They found that 87% of respondents felt that their mental health has been negatively impacted by their contract academic staff employment. And a major factor here is that non-permanent terms of their contracts make it difficult for them to make long-term plans or investments. In other words, what that means is, as people are taking up these positions within the academy, they don't have much certainty what their life will bring. Their contract might end in a few months or in a year, and past that point, well, who knows? And this makes it hard for people to organize themselves outside of their work. And so to wrap all this together, in my own interpretation, it's that academia is now disconnecting academic-oriented people from the communities that we live in. As academics, we face immense pressure to compete for diminishing opportunities. We're expected to frame the value of our work in terms of our individuality, our novelty, our impact, publications, and productivity. We're evaluated based on our CV, of course, sorted neatly into research, teaching, and service. We spend a lot of our time working really hard inside the campus bubble. And on a moment's notice, if a contract ends and another job arises somewhere else, we're expected to relocate our entire lives between institutions and geographies in search of possibly finding long-term security. And if that were not enough, of course, there's a lot of trouble in the world that we are experiencing, that we are sensitive to. Many of us as academics study these problems or their consequences. These are photographs taken in London, Ontario, where we all live. In just the last few years, showing wildfire smoke, where we had to wear masks just to get to work. London is built on floodplains, and so much of our infrastructure here is vulnerable to being washed away. And this is distressing for people. We know it's distressing because research has shown consistently that eco-anxiety, environmental anxiety, climate anxiety are on the rise in society. And this is something that medical practitioners are now starting to take seriously. I was interested in this graphic published in the Lancet Journal of Planetary Health in 2020 because one of the things they identify as a response to reduce the emotional suffering associated with climate change is to increase social prescribing of activities that enhance environmental, physical, and mental health. And I want to point out that this is not about eliminating eco-anxiety. This is not something that we can just get rid of or treat and make go away. It's something we have to learn to cope with in our day-to-day lives. And so this business of undertaking activities that can improve our environmental, physical, and mental health is, I think, really important for academics to pay attention to. I talked a little bit about Aristotle and that thinkers have been contemplating the public good for a long time. I think it's important to recognize that the universities we all know and work for today might be the current iteration of the university as a concept, but that concept is a lot older than the neoliberal growth economics that the corporatized university is now subservient to. And I don't have a lot of time to dissect this, but I would refer folks interested in this space to this excellent book called The Slow Professor, which advocates for us to slow down. That in order for us to get back to the university's origins, we need to prioritize thinking and thought before the immediate and endless needs of supporting growth, efficiency, and productivity. Perhaps what the academy needs is a humanistic approach that values its people and prioritizes our belonging. And perhaps it is through that belonging that we can be sustained as individual people and better able to serve the public good. And so I want to give you my sense of what it means as an academic to contribute to or interact with the public good. I'm going to break this down into three facets, and I'm going to use them to talk about my work in London. It starts with sharing what we have to give to the world, our knowledge, our skills, resources that can benefit society. We as academics can cultivate relationships that make societal change possible, and we can create reasons for ourselves and for others to care and sustain the work. And what unites these three facets, in my view, is that we have to learn to love where we live. As in, yes, we all live here, we are all concerned about global climate change, reducing global poverty, these massive, incomprehensible problems that are conflicting all across the world. But maybe we can also focus on loving where we live, just here in London, Ontario. And so I propose that in order to do so, we have to allow ourselves, despite everything I just told you, to lay down roots where we live. And I would consider that to be a radical act because it goes against everything that is expected of us. These are photos of roots from a willow tree growing in a park near my home. And when those roots extend into the water, they feed the tree. They also support nurseries of fish. They stabilize the creek bank from falling into the water. They serve a variety of functions. And we do this knowing that we might have to one day pick ourselves up and move somewhere else. That should not diminish the quality and the value of the roots we lay out in our community of the day. And so to start, I'm going to talk about my research and what I shared to try and advance my concerns about an issue in society. I recently completed my PhD studying this crazy problem of birds crashing into glass on buildings, which is weird to think about, to be honest. It's a bit of a strange topic for a PhD, but it's one that came to mean a lot to me personally because I lived it. I experienced it in my community. That is the only copy of my thesis I had printed, and I gave it to my family to keep in an archive. But I took this photo standing at a building that formed the centerpiece of my research. This is the International and Graduate Affairs building at Western University. It used to house the Ivy Business School. If you're familiar with campus and you know UC Hill, and you look just south of there, you'll see this building. It's quite beautiful, and it reflects the surrounding landscape, so you might miss it, especially if you're a bird. And this building is actually right in front of a patch of old growth forest on our campus, which is really special. I would highly recommend taking a walk back there. But it was no surprise to me that in addition to this being precious for humans, it was a very important stopover habitat for birds passing through our region during their spring and fall migrations. And so I give a lot of public outreach talks about birds crashing into glass. I think this photo does tell the story, so I can save a few words. Birds don't understand glass, and when they see a reflection of a tree, they think it's the real thing. There's no precedent in the natural world for vertical mirrors suspended as illusions all over where birds are moving through the environment at high speed. And so in walking around this building, this is often what I would come across. This is actually one of the luckier birds that survived the impact with the building. This is a warbler making its way north in the spring. And I call it one of the lucky ones because I was able to recuperate the bird and transport it to our local wildlife rehabilitation center called Salthaven, who were able to give the bird veterinary care and then release it. I won't be able to show the video, but this bird went on to continue its journey. And why I think this issue is important is because bird populations are declining really seriously all over the world and here in North America. A study in 2019 reported that around 3 billion birds have been lost since the year 1970. Now, that doesn't mean 3 billion birds have died. It means if you were to somehow go out and count how many birds exist on the landscape, that number has shrunk considerably. And the reasons for that shrinkage are associated with human activities, threats that humans have introduced to the landscape. I studied window collisions as a leading cause of direct bird deaths caused by people. And I documented this problem in my community, not by myself, but inviting people to contribute data. Folks would start texting me, I found a bird, what do you want me to do? And I would say, take a picture of it, because that's useful. And when we received those photographs, we would document them. We would put them into the community science platform called iNaturalist, which I highly recommend. It's on your smartphone or on a computer. And what you're looking at is a layout of where we found birds that had struck glass just on Western's campus. This project has since expanded, and we now collect records like this all over London and Middlesex County. And sometimes we found birds that we recovered, birds that were recently killed and still in good condition. And we kept them on ice so that myself and other volunteers supporting my research could lay them out in this elaborate photo to raise awareness, to say this is not a freak accident, even though you might have just experienced it one time. This is happening recurrently all over the place, and it's affecting a wide variety of species, including bird species at risk. And this photograph helped to open people's eyes. We were able to use it as a visual storytelling medium. And I'll say, having done this work for a long time, having received a lot of those text messages, having had birds die in my hand and consoled other people going through the same thing, that this issue affects human well-being. It is critical we recognize this is not just about protecting animals, it's about protecting people like the woman who felt she had to put these stickers all over her window on the inside of her office of that building I showed you because she wanted it to stop. Sadly, if you looked at that window from the outside, you can barely see the stickers. She was a bit heartbroken when I told her that. And I was really proud of my alma mater, Western University, when they stepped up and they invested and they treated this building. They applied a grid of visual markers on the glass that signaled to a bird, you can't fly through here. And they continued and treated buildings all across our university campus. This is something I've got a fair bit of experience with because I also treat windows in the community. What it might look like is peeling off a film like you see in the bottom right. Of course, it doesn't have to be dots on glass. There's many creative ways that we can integrate bird safety into the design of new and existing buildings. And when I look at this image, it makes me happy because I know that birds are no longer being killed in this spot, but I also think this is symbolic in a lot of ways. Why do people value having such large windows on their homes or in their workplaces? It's because they want to be connected to nature around them, right? In the middle of winter, you can be warm and cozy and look outside and still feel connected to the ecosystem. And now, when you look through this window, you're recognizing not just the nature beyond the glass, but the act of care that went into protecting nature. As in, this is giving people hope. It's showing that when we work together, we can enjoy nature while also situating ourselves within it. Every single post-secondary institution in London, Ontario now has examples of bird-safe buildings on their campuses. And I am so proud to call my home London because this is a place where people know what this is and people care about it. And we see this over and over again. I give guest lectures at different institutions and I'll ask the students who I've never met before, do you know what the dots are for? And over the years, more and more hands come up. And that is how we achieve lasting cultural change. I want to highlight that, this is a problem for big buildings like our downtown core, the larger ones I showed you on campus, but it's also a problem at our homes. In fact, most of the birds that are hitting glass are striking windows on homes, which are the most numerous form of building on the landscape. There's just way more homes than there are skyscrapers. And so in the old days, windows may have been quite tiny, but nowadays we love floor-to-ceiling windows, we love glass balcony railings. It's quite important that if you have a bird hit your window at home, or if you feed birds, apply markers on the glass to prevent it from happening again. And if you have questions, you can come talk to me about it afterwards. So what I've since worked on as part of my PhD and beyond is figuring out, we know that birds crash into glass, we know that there are solutions for it, how do we actually solve the problem? And it's through a collection of activities that interface together, retrofitting existing buildings, making sure that new construction isn't dangerous for birds, engaging with communities so they understand the actions they should take at home, and enacting policy to oversee all of the above. And when we achieve all of these in tandem, we achieve lasting societal change. And to carry out this work, I had the great privilege of aligning it under the umbrella of an organization called Bird Friendly London. We are a bird-friendly city in London, Ontario. And I don't mean to take sole credit for that because people have been caring about birds since a long time before I got here. But myself and other volunteers helped to apply for Nature Canada, a national charity, to certify us for being bird friendly. We met the criteria of their certification program, and we are actually the highest ranking city or municipality across the country. And this has been a really useful vehicle for communicating outward about these solutions for protecting birds. That there is our northern cardinal. That's our city mascot selected by popular vote. And I often use that bird in my storytelling because people care about it, right? There's a lot of symbolism attached to that bird. And you can see in the photo on the right that that is a feather patch left by a cardinal that hit a window. We don't want to harm the creatures that we care about. There are a variety of actions that all of us can take in our daily lives, as well as structural actions for society that can help to protect, conserve, and recover bird populations. I've already talked a little bit about glass. I would be remiss to not mention that if you have a pet cat, you should treat it like a dog. Kittens can be trained to wear leashes and harnesses just like puppies can. You can build an enclosure to take your cat outside. Don't let it run amok. Don't put it in harm's way. and make sure that you're taking responsibility for the impacts of your pet on the environment. But these 7 simple actions need to be put out into the community. We need to educate more people about them. And so we do so through the Bird Friendly City program. And how we communicate about the value of birds is about making them relevant to people's daily lives. You might care a lot about birds, like I do, or maybe you don't. But I bet you care about having trees in your city. I bet you care about the cost of growing coffee that you drink in the morning. There are so many different ways that birds contribute services to human society. These are just a few of them. And I found talking to people about the functions that birds perform helps them to understand the interconnectedness of protecting birds and protecting ourselves. We also know that access to birds and biodiversity generally is really beneficial for human well-being. This is a study published by some friends of mine back in 2024, and they looked at the positive association between healthy biodiversity, tree richness, and bird species richness in cities, and found that there was a positive correlation with self-reported mental health and well-being. I think a lot of us know that this is true. I mean, when I hear the sounds of birds in the morning, it definitely makes me feel joy. I have birds that nest around my house sometimes, and I mean, what's not to love, right? And I think there's all kinds of other signs that people are craving this connection to nature, right? These are names of new subdivisions in the London area. And what do we call them? We name them after the creatures that are sometimes being displaced by development. Warbler Woods, Fox Hollow, Eagle Ridge. I mean, I'm not anti-housing by any stretch, but I think this is suggesting to me that people are wanting access to green spaces in their city, where they live. And so I started looking into this notion of nature-positive decision-making. And I'd say London, Ontario could take some tips from London, England, because in the UK, they've introduced official policy for biodiversity net gain. And it's visualized with this schematic. With traditional development, you have green space, you clear it, you build something, and we would call that a net loss for biodiversity. In our society today, you'll often see the term no net loss, where they say, yeah, we're gonna have to clear, we're gonna build, we're gonna plant some trees, and we're gonna assume, it evens out, that there won't be a reduction, there won't be an increase either. And in the UK, what they're saying is that's not enough. Biodiversity has already declined past tipping points. We need net gain. So now, when you develop and you build, you integrate nature and biodiversity protection into the development, and that has become standard practice. And this has great benefits for birds. You guys may have seen this. There are birds called swifts in the UK that now have homes inside of buildings. They have these little bricks with holes in them that are standard as part of building construction that the birds can use to complete their life cycle. Imagine how much joy this would bring if you could look out your window in the morning and there were birds there, because that was something that was considered when your home was built. And I'm also really impressed that in the UK, they're pushing for bird-safe design to just become standard. It'll just be how we build all new things in England, integrating bird-safe design into glazing components. So lots of reasons I'd say to be optimistic. The growth I've witnessed in this space has been tremendous. I want to now talk about some of the relationships that I've explored doing work on and off campus in London that I think have made it possible to connect with the public good. This is a funny photo of the first time I ever visited London City Hall. It's actually a screenshot from a CTV News video. And what I'm holding in my hand, believe it or not, is a bird that hit a window on City Hall sometime before I arrived at the building. And I was going to talk about this notion of integrating bird-safe design into local planning policy, and I thought, I need a prop. No disrespect to the bird, of course, but I brought it with me, and I know from conversations with counselors that happened much later, this was highly memorable for them. And I've been going back to City Hall ever since. So I sometimes get asked, Brendon, this seems great, what's not to like? What's the status of this in London? Earlier this year, the government of Ontario passed new legislation that essentially restricted municipalities like London from enacting green building standards, including bird-safe design. This was labeled as red tape. However, to give them credit, the London City Council committed that all new municipal facilities that are approved will use bird-safe design, which is really positive. And I wanted to highlight that when that decision was made regarding municipal facilities, Myself and Brian Salt from Salthaven showed up and spoke about the importance of that for our community. You'll recall that Salthaven is where I was taking the birds that were injured, and so we were able to speak for the public good by connecting with our lived experiences, not just me as an academic, but a practitioner. Recently, I was really impressed to see this. Just last month, a report was brought to the Planning Committee, which shows that the city is now creating incentives for bird safe design to be adopted. So that area on the map shown in yellow is a transit priority corridor. And if you, as a developer, want to qualify for a substantial loan from the city, I believe up to $1.5 million, you have to demonstrate that what you're building is going to be bird friendly. Super positive. I would call that really progressive policy. The city has done other amazing work. So how many of you are familiar with the Neighbourhood decision-making program? Anybody? Oh, I'm seeing hands raised. That makes me so happy. So this program is a bit beleaguered because it was recently defunded, and that's why I like to talk about it and promote it. This is participatory budgeting, where anybody, any member of the community can say, I want this to be in our community. And they pitch an idea, and then we vote on those ideas. And if the ideas are popular enough, they'll be implemented and funded by the city. And so I was so thrilled when a resident, not even me, pitched the idea that one of the biggest community centers in London should have its glass treated for bird safety. And the city approached me and said, do you want to help out with this? And I said, of course I do. And that's exactly what we did. This project was funded by popular vote. And earlier this year, we revealed this beautiful installation of artwork that I helped to design, not only treating the glass for bird safety, but celebrating the very birds that we are protecting through this installation. This is on the East Lions Community Centre in East London. It's the first municipal facility to be made bird safe, and I'm super excited about it. I also am in love with these. How many of you have seen our new rapid transit shelters across the city? Everybody who rides the bus gets to interact with bird safe glass. And again, this is not an initiative I pushed for. This is something that the people designing this with the LTC knew about. And they brought it forward and said, we're going to use bird safe glass because it's the right thing to do. Again, it's that sign of a cultural shift. This is what people now expect. And so these are being erected all across the city. Since my first visit to City Hall, holding a dead bird in a bag, I have been invited back in a more formal capacity because I had the great privilege of serving on and chairing an advisory committee to City Council. Our committee, it's a mouthful, it's called ESACAC, or the Environmental Stewardship and Action Community Advisory Committee. We have a very broad mandate, but we get to provide guidance to the city on matters to do with climate change planning, environmental stewardship, cleanup of contaminated areas, a long list of things. And it's through this engagement, through this committee appointment, that I've been able to enact a lot of good. For example, working with the city, we created an education brochure, which we now provide standardly to architects and planners. Some of you might recognize this debacle as well. This was work that I undertook while a member of the advisory committee because I wanted to restore bird habitat around my home. It was really important for me because I had flooding concerns in my neighborhood. I had a basement flood. I live in a biodiversity desert that's just surrounded by lawn, and I thought, I'm interested in gardening. It's a hopeful activity that makes me feel good. It's how I express my values. And so I naturalized my property. And lo and behold, I got a ticket. And this ticket was escalated. We had a great dialogue with the city through the advisory committee and city council. And ultimately what we did is we worked with the city and we modernized the bylaw to be more permissive. Now, if you want to grow native plants on your property, you don't have to worry about cutting everything to below 8 inches in height. This is a totally acceptable form of landscaping. There are certain health and safety considerations to keep in mind. You can't block sight lines by having tall plants right beside the road. You can't be growing noxious weeds like poison ivy. But by and large, the restrictions are about health, safety, and nuisance. And if somebody doesn't like how it looks because it's messy, well, they can go hang out in their garden. That was my attitude. I was also really thrilled to work with the city to circulate these signs that the city sponsored through the advisory committee. We distribute these to residents that have gardens that look like mine. And this is an education strategy so that people can signal to their neighbors that what they're doing is intentional and it's beneficial. And if you visit the link there, it talks about all of the good reasons why people are transitioning what they're doing with their landscaping. This is a way that we as individuals can contribute to the conservation of biodiversity all across our city. And what's more, from this experience, I was able to contribute to a report prepared by my lab at TMU, basically how to do this work. If you're a municipality or a group in a municipality and you're wanting to protect biodiversity by modernizing your property standards bylaws, here's the roadmap to do so. From all of this work with the city, I want to emphasize that an important lesson for me has been to engage with representatives in government. I am so privileged to call elected representatives on city council my friends because I invested in those relationships. That's me posing with Ward 6 Councillor Sam Troso, also known as the Lorax, for one day of the year, celebrating our new signs. That's me and my friend Councillor Skylar Frank for Ward 11 and her adorable son Rory. And that's me canvassing in the bitter cold with Terence Kernahan, who's our MPP in provincial government for my riding. I would say having these relationships has enabled me to follow what's happening in government. It's helped me to have a voice. If I want to reach out, I know that there are people I can talk to. But I would say beyond just voting for people, voting for strong candidates, which is, I would call the bare minimum, you can also support their campaigns. You can go out and canvass for them. You can make a small donation. You can offer to help with social media. Running a campaign to become an elected official is really difficult, and it takes a community to make it happen. And I'll point out that we do have a municipal election coming up pretty quickly next year. Through my connections, I was also able to do some advocacy at a higher level of government. And I would say it's not that London, Ontario is a silo. It's if we want to love where we live and enact change for the public good, we have to understand how the different levels of government work together. We live in a federation. That means municipalities, the provinces, territories, and the federal government are expected to cooperate. And this problem of birds crashing into glass is primarily a provincial responsibility because provinces regulate the way that buildings are designed and constructed. And so over the past few years, we went back to Queen's Park in Toronto, where the Ontario legislature sits. And we struck up a really positive relationship with MPP Chris Glover, who sponsored legislation that would have embedded this in the provincial building code, meaning that all new building construction would have to be safe for birds. And you can see we even brought birds with us to signal how important this is to our decision makers. I'm really proud that a lot of the faces there wear different partisan hats. Some of them wear red, some of them wear green, some of them wear orange. This is not a partisan issue, but we know that because of the relationships that we forged along the way. It was actually one of the MPPs in that photo who tipped me off to a recent opportunity last year to weigh in on the province's upcoming budget. They actually had a traveling party. They came to London and they said, okay, Ontarians, what do you want to see in the budget? And I was able to show up and speak about research that I did at Western, highlighting the value of nature-based solutions. That if we want to adapt our cities to climate change, we need to think about working with nature and framing that as a cost recovery method, as in it's much cheaper to plan this in advance rather than reacting to continual storms. I also got to work with our MP for London, Ariel Keabaga, who was kind enough to sponsor a petition for me last year, asking about the federal government's current approach to meeting their 2 billion trees pledge and seeking information about what they're doing at the federal level about preventing birds from crashing into glass. All of this was made possible because I picked up the phone or I sent a DM and I said, hey, you are my representative, I want to talk to you. And they were happy to oblige. This spring, I even took birds that we had collected here in London, Guelph, Toronto, all across Ontario. These are birds that struck glass, including bird species at risk, and we brought them to Parliament in Ottawa, and we laid them out just as our new Prime Minister was being sworn in next door. And we did this because we wanted to illustrate that the federal government has a mandate to protect these birds and that people all across Canada are paying attention. In speaking about relationships, I want to cover some others outside of the government that have made my work possible. The Upper Thames River Conservation Authority is such a force for good in our society. Locally in London, other conservation authorities are doing excellent work all across Ontario. For example, at Western University, we undertook a project a couple of years ago using what's called bioengineering. We planted willow trees and other shrubs all along the bank of Medway Creek, shown in the photo. We did so in collaboration with Indigenous peoples. The London Public Library helped us to tell the story. We had students come out and actually get paid for their work on a sustainability project. And this has been such a productive project in the way that we have been able to tell the story of nature-based solutions. I also recently worked with the Upper Thames to treat windows through their Green Leaders program. We went out to Ingersoll and empowered students at an elementary school to treat their glass on their classroom facing a woodlot. I was able to publish that work in the magazine for Ontario Nature. So these kinds of partnerships in community also can lead to publication opportunities for academics. Nature London is another excellent organization. If you're not familiar with them, you should definitely get acquainted. They offer all kinds of programs all throughout the year to get out and enjoy nature, monitoring for species at risk, visiting really precious environmentally significant areas. They offer an annual lecture series in the winter called Nature in the City, which is super informative. The photo on the right I included because it's with one of my heroes, Winnie Wake. She's sort of our local Jane Goodall, and she's a world-leading expert on this very sensitive bird called the chimney swift. In our photo, we're handing a sign to the owner of Nova Craft Canoe for their stewardship of a chimney on their property. I don't have time to talk about it, but we got to climb up and actually look down that chimney and film birds flying into it at sunset. It was a crazy experience made possible by my connections with Nature London. The London Environmental Network has been a huge supporter of Bird Friendly London. This is an example of a project that we undertook that was made possible by our collaboration. You may have seen around Western's campus, there are a bunch of boxes mounted on trees that are large enough to house owls. And we put those there because we wanted to raise awareness of urban raptors serving an important function as pest control. Unfortunately, a lot of buildings in our city are surrounded by bait traps with poison, and that poison causes secondary issues in the environment. It leads to birds of prey getting poisoned, coyotes, pets, even children. And so what we wanted to do is educate building owners. Here's how you can properly prevent pest issues by excluding animals from getting in. And so partnering with the London Environmental Network, Salthaven, a local wildlife exclusion company, we shot a whole video, a how-to tutorial on how to do this. Again, taking those issues for birds and turning that into practical action to serve the public good. This is another really exciting partnership that was undertaken in support of efforts towards truth and reconciliation. This is a crazy photo because there's actually over 300 trees in that truck. We loaded those. There's a couple of my helpers today in the audience getting those trees in. And these trees were purchased with support from the City of London and Reforest London as part of our Forest City Tree Festival that took place on campus last year, a wonderful public event that included sending trees downriver to our Indigenous neighbors with the support of the Office of Indigenous Initiatives at Western. Most of the trees that are growing in there are fruit trees, and so we were duly able to support food security for Indigenous communities. Again, partnerships for the public good made possible. This was actually what I was doing just last weekend. My neighborhood association partnered again with Reforest London and the City of London to plant trees in our public park. I live in a neighborhood that I think is missing tree canopy in places. There aren't very many flowers in the parks. And we got community out to celebrate that we want the tree canopy for all. Incidentally, the person in the very front of that photo is Terence Kernahan planting his own tree. And I was especially excited about this planting because with support from Nature London through their Eco Grants program, I was able to buy a bunch of other native plants and take them door to door to all the houses in the area in yellow and offer the plants to the homeowners to say, we're planting native species in the park. How would you like for the green space on your property to be connected to it? As in, can we form an ecological corridor that supports pollinators and wildlife across both the private and the public realm? Of course, the first time I went to the houses, some of the homeowners were like, what? What's a native plant? You want me to have bees in my house? Are you crazy? And I thought about it and I realized that what I value might not be what they value. And so I tried a different tactic. Again, working with the Conservation Authority, I went to a school around the corner, again, participating in their Green Leaders program, and I met a bunch of really energetic grade 7 and 8 students, environmental leaders, who were interested in pollinators. And I said, I would love to work with you. let's make some seed balls, which we did. We scattered them all over their school grounds. And I asked them, can you help me write a letter to these homeowners that I'm going to be going and talking to? And I want you to explain to them why pollinators are important to you, and to ask them if they'd be willing to plant species that support pollinators. And of course, they also took the liberty of drawing beautifully all over. I've got 5 versions of this letter. Each one is unique. This was so positively received by residents when I was knocking at the door, because it was no longer just about what I care about. It was no longer about just the bees or the butterflies. It was about for their grandkids. It was about for the community. And again, a project made possible through relationships. I've had some great partnerships with industry in London. For example, in thinking about this problem of birds crashing into glass, I thought the best people to talk to are where you would go if you feed birds and you wanted advice. So we have a bird feeding store in London called Wild Birds Unlimited that has enthusiastically displayed warning messages. Birds are coming, we have to save the songbirds. And they recently even invited me to treat windows on their storefront so that everybody who comes in to buy birdseed gets to interact with it. Similarly, humans is where a lot of people go for strawberries, among other things, and native plants. And they were kind enough to not only allow me to treat their front windows on their store, but they also began carrying this product to enable people that are shopping for native plants to feed birds, to also protect those birds at home. And so finally, the last facet I want to talk about is creating reasons to care and to sustain the work. I think to love where we live, as I certainly do, we need to experience it first. I think people will value changes more when they can relate to them. That applies for the homeowners accepting the native plants from me. That applies to us when we're thinking about what we want to spend our limited time on. I think we can give people hope when people can see that the actions that we're taking are resulting in desirable outcomes, as in we can actually have agency to meaningfully fix the problems in the world. And if we find reasons to care about where we live and we act according to those reasons, we can make ourselves and our homes more resilient. And I can't think of a better example than this photo, which is from one of our cleanups with the Antler River Rally, volunteers organizing across the community to pick up garbage. There is nothing better than looking at the amount of litter you have cleaned up from a park, preventing it from ending up in the river. You can see the before and after pictures and just know you are making a tangible difference in the moment. I think the university in London, Western, should be praised for a number of ways they are giving people more agency. For example, by mobilizing resources for projects that are actually led by the community. For example, their Sustainable Impact Fund has been leveraged to achieve all kinds of good on their campus. And I want to highlight that the 3 buildings you see here, which are now bird safe, were made such by people working in those buildings advocating for it. It wasn't me writing these applications. It was people who said, I saw what happened at the International and Graduate Affairs building. We want to do that with our windows here too. And through this fund, we were able to support and accommodate leadership by people in the community. Western also has a new program, new-ish, orientation serves or services that's part of their O Week. And each year we send undergraduate students and graduate students out into the community to work with partners and accomplish good. For example, I had the privilege of welcoming students to where we did that planting on campus with the Conservation Authority a few years prior. And the students get to see this and understand why it's there, that it was enacted by students, that there are opportunities for them to do similar work on campus or off. And they even got to scatter some seeds and become part of the project themselves. I think we need initiatives like this, not just during orientation week, but all year round, and not just for students. I now teach a course about sustainability. And one of the assignments we use in my course that I think the students quite enjoy is I actually require them to attend a meeting in person at City Hall. I give them a choice. I say, here's the schedule, here's the agendas, pick any meeting you like and get on the bus or ride your bike and attend the meeting. And when you're there, I want you to take a selfie to confirm you did your assignment. And I want you to record a reflection of what this was like for you. What did it actually feel like to be in that meeting? Did you learn anything? Did you encounter any barriers that made it hard for you to participate? What would you recommend would make that experience easier? And we share those insights with the students, but also with the city, because this makes it fun. This makes it something that we should be proud of. And as a professor, I'm proud to know that Some of the students that went through my class previously continue to follow local politics. They have a better firsthand understanding because it's now relevant to them. Of course, if you're shy and you don't want to go to City Hall, London City Council does live stream all of its committee meetings and City Council meetings on YouTube. It's a great way to get acquainted with what's happening in our city. I've talked a lot about environmental public good, which has been my primary focus during my PhD. But I want to highlight that there are a lot of other social issues in our city that interact with the environmental issues. And if you are passionate about, for example, helping people who are homeless, making sure people are not hungry, there are so many opportunities out there for you to give of your time and skills and gifts to directly help people. For example, I kept hearing about homeless people on the news, and I thought to myself, when is the last time I actually talked to a homeless person? And so I decided to apply to volunteer at this organization called Arcade Street Mission that essentially operates a mini restaurant. You don't have to pay to eat there, and it serves people that otherwise would be hungry. We give them a facility to do their laundry, to take a shower, to access key services. And working in this space means I get to put a hot plate of food in front of somebody who needs it. I get to talk to them and find out how their day was going. I get to find out what they think about the programs that the city's offering. And for me, the greatest joy of all was a couple Christmases ago, they were kind enough to let me give away birdseed to people that were living rough, who acknowledged that it was so nice to just be treated like a human being and given something nice. Not necessary, but just nice. As much as I love to feed birds, so do they. If you want to understand our environment better in London, I urge you, take advantage of our environmentally significant areas throughout the city. These are remarkable natural features in our city. I think a lot of people who attend university aren't aware of them. The one closest to our campus is the Medway Valley ESA, but there are others. And this is where you can really connect with nature and feel like you are part of it. And that's exactly what we've started to do at Western. We take students out into the Medway, just beside campus, of which Western University owns a substantial portion, and we give students a reason to care about it. We give them a chance to witness what's happening to the ESA, what happens when people venture off the trails or let their dog run without a leash, what happens when we let invasive species run amok. And when people get to see it with their own eyes and relate to it, it becomes important to them. And so I want to wrap my talk just with where I situate my feelings in all this. I think home is where we let our roots grow, even if it's only for a short time. I might not be living in London in 20 years. I'll acknowledge that. This is a photo of my front garden. It brings me joy every day. I hope that when someone else lives there after me, they take equally good care of it. And where we make our home and we lay down roots is also where we live as part of nature and with nature as part of us. These are all things in our environment that we can eat. These are nuts that grow on the trees on our streets. These are fungi that are edible, morel mushrooms, fiddlehead ferns, garlic mustard, which is a great way of dealing with an invasive species. All kinds of raspberries go throughout the trail system in London. And when you eat this as part of your day, you are actually taking the earth inside of you and you become part of the ecosystem. And so for me, what has made all the difference in translating my research for the public good has been not only to think holistically about it in the broadest terms, but to love where I live. And I encourage you to do the same because London needs all the love we can give it. If you are excited, as I am, to get out in community, I wanted to just highlight a few upcoming opportunities. The Hope and Action Festival is being co-hosted by the organization shown here on October 25th. It should be a lot of fun. I'll be there, so please do come say hi. This is all about building resilient communities. I'm also part of the organizing committee for an upcoming summit on food security. How can we make our food system in London and surrounding region more resilient? And then finally, the city is undertaking a review of how it manages its parks, and they want to hear from you. So if you visit the link here, you can learn more about the information sessions that are ongoing or fill out an online survey. And I want to thank you very much for your attention and your time, and happy to take any questions.
Hi, Brendon.
Hi.
What was your experience dealing with the large tower owners in downtown Toronto? I asked that because I spent about 8 years working in TD Tower in the finance, and I was shocked, and it just brought back the memory. One day, early morning, I had to go in very early in the morning, and I was at the base of the tower walking into the main branch, pileated woodpeckers and about 10 other dead birds there. There was talk in the early 90s about them starting to look at lights and whatnot, but then silence. And so how have they evolved in their thinking and their approach to lighting up the sky at night, or have they?
I'm sorry for that experience. I'm happy to report that that building has been treated with the dots, like the one that I showed you. It was actually, I believe at the time, the largest retrofit of a building in history. Massive investment, and they have also implemented a strategy to turn lights out. That work was made possible by the NGO that I now work for, the Fatal Light Awareness Program, or FLAP Canada, who have collected those birds for many, many years and engaged with property management. A piece I didn't touch on that I think is critical is that in Canada, it is actually illegal for buildings to kill birds. As of regulations that were adopted in 2022, you have to demonstrate due diligence to solve that problem if the government receives a complaint about your building. So I think there's reasons for hope, but to your earlier question about engaging with building owners, it is a challenge. And I don't think it's because they want to kill birds. I think it's because we don't have good incentive structures in place. We don't help property owners to offset potentially huge costs to undertake that work. And so it takes time, but I think we're making progress.
A lot of building owners are actually insurance companies that use them, of course. London Life, Canada Life, huge through Great West Life, GWL Property, own a number of them. I think that obviously you've probably approached them, I guess, and others. Yeah. Okay.
Brendon, thanks for a great talk. And having met you and known you for a couple of years and watching this talk, something that's so clear that you do is really build relationships with people. And you really take the time to do that. And I was wondering if you could reflect or maybe share a little bit about some of the strategies that you use, especially in a very politically divided time and as a scientist.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. I don't know that there's one cookie cutter answer to that question. Of course, people are complicated, situations are complicated. I think in general, I try and be humble, and I kind of wear my values on my sleeve, right? I want people to know what I care about up front. And I try and find common ground with people. Like something that I've been challenging myself of late is how can I empathize with people I disagree with? Even when our values are like totally opposite from one another, like I need to be able to understand what they care about and be able to speak in those terms. And I find if you start from a place of common ground, it's often easier to guide them into other conversational directions. I think also being patient with people. I find changing minds and hearts doesn't usually happen on the spot. And you might need to iteratively go back, have a conversation a few times, send a polite follow-up. I think persistence helps, and when you build relationships for the long term, that's where the trust comes into play. A lot of what I've been able to do has been because people have trusted me. I mean, I'm a grad student, right? And so, yeah, to complement that trust, I would say gratitude. Gratitude just for people's time and expressing it often helps people to know that like what they share with you is valued.
Hi, thank you. I have a very short logistical question.
Yeah.
The bill, was it a private member's bill?
Unfortunately, yes.
Okay. Was it passed?
No, it was not.
Is it like, does it have a hope or is it gone? Do we
Well,
have to
I
start
didn't want to
again?
get too political.
It's logistical.
Yeah, so that bill was brought under the previous session of the government. So because it was not passed, it would have been thrown out when we got a new government, albeit one that looks the same. We realized early on in the advocacy that, to be honest, we would not have the support of the majority needed to have it passed. And so what I did was I sought out the leaders of all three of the other parties and spoke with them and explained what this was. And I asked them if they would sign a letter calling on the government to enact a bird safe design standard in the building code. And they did. And so that letter lives on. And we will have it in 4 years, we'll have it in 8 years, we'll have it in 12 years. Eventually, this change will come, and we will build on those relationships.
My follow-up logistical question is, when do you sleep?
Sometimes during the day. Yeah, it's not something I touched on, but it is strenuous sometimes. And my partner, who's in the audience, can attest better than anyone that I do sometimes overextend myself. I think one of the virtues of grad school is it allows you to explore your limits. How far can you push yourself? And if you're pushing yourself for things that you care about, sometimes it's easy to trick yourself into thinking you can actually stretch further than you can. My relationships with people, I think, allow me to take my time, and I do worry about disappointing folks, but I also know people are forgiving, and if I say, I've got a little too much on the go right now, can we circle back? Usually they're accommodating. But it's nice to be done my PhD on that note. I am definitely sleeping better.
So one of the things that you said is like, put down roots wherever you are for however long you can be there. Do you have recommendations for people who are frequently relocating as to where to start and where are good places to build those roots or ways?
That is a really good question. I don't claim to speak for everyone. People have different proclivities. For me, planting helps a lot because I can walk by a tree that I planted years ago and see how it's doing. I might move halfway across the world and I know that tree is still there. Same with treating windows, to be honest. I mean, no matter where I am, the value of that work continues past my time there. I think helping people, even though it feels transient, also is a way of doing that. I mean, you're going to be able to think back on the time you spent anywhere and reflect on the good, the bad, the ugly, but you have to actually cultivate the good, right? And a lot of that good, I think, is rooted in the people you meet while you live in a given place. So I think really it's putting yourself out there and trying different things.
Thank you for the talk. It was very interesting. I am wondering if you have any thoughts regarding how activism and academics that are involved in the public good should deal, or what should be their attitudes regarding greenwashing?
Ooh, great question. Very timely question. So just to paraphrase to make sure I understand correctly, you're asking me to elaborate on where you have activists in the academy, how should they go about addressing greenwashing? Is that correct? Yes. This is a topic near and dear to me. And I think the rules around greenwashing have recently changed. They now have teeth. The federal government passed legislation less than a year ago, I believe, that makes it illegal to greenwash and outlines pretty strict criteria as to what constitutes greenwashing. I think activists should be aware of what those criteria are and use them to their advantage. If you see something, say something. And if you see greenwashing happening, I think public shaming only gets you so far. Ideally, addressing those concerns upstream is a better approach. So as strategies and plans and programs are developed, making sure that the people writing the language are aware of greenwashing language, I'd say is a really important role for activists. But it's something I think we have to be vigilant about. Like, society's value of the environment is shifting, and corporations are catering to that. There's a game that they play sometimes and trying to derive the reputational benefits without actually delivering. And sometimes it takes somebody strong-willed to pursue it and say, that's not right, and you need to make good on the promises. So I encourage activists, advocates, scholars interested in those spaces to keep at it, because we need your work.
I just want to say thank you so much for kicking things off. We appreciate it so much. Let's give Brendon another round of applause, please.
Thank you.
And thank you to every single one of you for coming out. I mean, we at Rotman appreciate it so much. Your involvement makes this meaningful for us. And please consider coming out to the next 5 ones. We are going to have a blast. There's going to be a great amount of variety. We'll be, keep an eye out though, because sometimes we'll be here. Sometimes we will be at Innovation Works. Sometimes we will be at the library. And we will also have one at Cronin Observatory on campus. So always fresh ideas, always new places.